welcome to Athens City Council. This evening, we will be meeting in council committees. The meeting will be called to order by the City Council President, who will then pass discussion over to a respective committee. The chair of the committee will introduce the discussion topics and provide an overview of the issues at hand. If needed, members of the administration will offer brief statements to provide further context. We will then welcome input from the community. Any citizens who wish to speak will be asked to state their name and address, both verbally and on the sign and sheet located at the podium. Individuals will be given one opportunity to share their thoughts, and the committee chair will have the authority to limit each speaker to 3 minutes. Once all citizens have had the opportunity to speak within the 15-minute time period allotted for total public participation on each topic, the public comment portion will be closed. Council committee members will then continue their deliberations. There may be additional questions directed to the administration during this time. When the discussion on the topic concludes, the chair will indicate whether legislation will be introduced at the next regular session of council and move on to the next item on the agenda or adjourn the committee if their work is complete. The next committee chair will then call their committee to order, proceeding in the same manner as before. Once all committees have adjourned, City Council will conclude for the evening.
And welcome to Athens City Council. It's Monday, November 12th, 2024 at 7:02 p.m. And we are beginning in special session tonight. Our first order of business is to establish quorum. All council members are present and we have quorum. The next item of business is an ordinance for third reading. This is ordinance 98-24, and it's introduced by all members of council. It is an ordinance approving the Athens-Hocking Solid Waste Management Plan. We have received a presentation on this plan and have 3 readings, and tonight's special session is simply to receive a motion and a second and vote on approving this plan. Thank you. We have a motion and a second for approval. Are there any comments or questions? Other administration, elected officials, or the audience? Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. The next item of business is adjournment for this special session of council. May I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved. Second.
A motion and a second for adjournment. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you. The special session is adjourned. We now move on to our committees this evening. And the first committee is the Finance and Personnel Committee, but I'm going to ask all council members to remain in their seats as we have a presentation from Molly Fitzgerald from the Economic Development Council and their contract renewal. Molly, will you please join us?
Let's see, is this on? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for having me. I, come and present to you at the end of each year ahead of, as you said, the renewal of the city's membership to the Economic Development Council to give you an overview of all the activities we've been engaged in throughout the year. So I think by now everyone knows the mission of the EDC, but we're a catalyst for quality jobs and progress in Athens County and throughout the region by creating a network of economic development resources through partnership, government, business, nonprofits. I always start with this overview slide. We continue to kind of prioritize our work in 3 buckets: site development, revitalization efforts, and business retention and expansion attraction projects. So you can go through the overview, but I'm going to get into each of these in a little bit more detail as I go through the presentation. I include this every year too, our funding, our 2024 secured funding. So that kind of first section is everything that has actually been secured. This includes all of the different grants that we've received through Jobs Ohio for businesses and site development projects, as well as allocation from Congressman Balderson's community project funding, which I'll talk more about in a minute, and then our remediation, assessment and remediation dollars through Ohio Department of Development and the Ohio EPA. I also include the revenue captured from the incentive programs that we manage. They're at the bottom, the enterprise zone agreements, the TIF, and the DRDs. And then in the middle, it's kind of set up funny here, but in the middle, I'm calling that the pipeline. Those are grants that we are currently in the process of applying for that we would anticipate getting in 2025. So total funding for 2024 is just over $3.7 million. I do this each year, a company spotlight. This one is not within the city of Athens, but in Albany, the village of Albany. And for those who may or may not be familiar, Wedgwood Connect, they did the asset sale from RXQ Compounding, and so now occupy the former RXQ building out in Albany. They received $750,000 in a Jobs Ohio revitalization grant, as well as $600,000 in job creation tax credits, and that's to retrofit the facility. Wedgwood Connect, they did the assets, what they, to get it to a point where it's operational for them. They are a 503B drug compounding facility. They compound veterinarian drugs. So includes job creation, job retention, average annual wage of $47.78 an hour, and a significant fixed asset investment of $5.5 million. All these metrics have to be made by 2027. So again, it's not in the city of Athens, but a good example of a successful EDC project. We continue to spend a lot of time, and by we, I mean the Athens County Port Authority, right? The Port Authority is run through the Economic Development Council office. Spend a lot of time on brownfield remediation projects, and I certainly think it's time well spent. This allows us to help with blight in our community and prime sites, good industrial sites or otherwise commercial sites for redevelopment opportunities. So in addition to the Ohio Department of Development's brownfield remediation program, which the Port Authority is the entity that the county has chosen to manage those funds, we used our entire $1 million set aside, and then we've also gotten some funding through the Ohio EPA's targeted brownfield assessment program as well. So I list all the projects there. That 954,000 number will be over $1 million once the final Washington Road number comes in. And then also including on here pipeline sites for 2025. So more assessment in Chansey around the Bailey's development. Ambassador Laundry, I've had a couple conversations with city leadership on that. And then the OU Ridges property for the 317 board. So. And I kind of thought you would save questions for later, but if at any point you want to chime in and raise a hand, I'm happy to answer questions. All right, so this project I did include, since it is in the city of Athens. Obviously, everyone is familiar with the 63 South Court Street redevelopment project, the Lostro building. So obviously in 2023, we got the brownfields funding for that, for the site assessment, asbestos abatement, cleanup, some interior demo. This year, we were able to facilitate a 10-year enterprise zone agreement between the county, a 10-year 100% enterprise zone agreement between the commissioners and the company and the developer. So that is really going to help get one of the funding sources that they're using to get that project over the finish line, in addition to the PACE financing. So I do serve, if council members weren't aware, I'm now serving on the ESID board, which was created to establish or provide that property assessed clean energy financing for this project. Not to say other projects can't benefit from the ESID. We hope and encourage more projects to include PACE in that capital stack, and now that we have an ESID, we can help those companies do that, in or outside the city. The EDC is real, yes?
About your last statement. So is that an Athens County specific initiative, the ESID?
The ESID board is a City of Athens board. However, you can invite, I'm not like a legal expert here, but you can expand the district to include other communities. If there was a property or a project that came up and was interested in using PACE financing, you could kind of add them to the ESID board, if that makes sense. And again, I'm not doing a good job of explaining that.
No, that's all right, thank you.
Albany, so continue to do a lot around the Albany Industrial Park. This has been an area that the EDC has shifted focus to over the last couple of years. And so this year we spent a lot of time with the engineering and design plans, as well as identifying other sources of funding to help with all of the infrastructure that is required out there ahead of development. So in June, we were notified, right, it still has a lot of hoops to jump through, but we were notified that we received a $1.5 million allocation from Congressman Balderson's community project funding. The EDC did not have anything to do with this directly, but I bring up the university's award of $2.5 million from the state because that's one of the benefits of Albany is that it's very close to the university airport. It has access, will have access once we have our access road, to the 4-lane highway, and then it has rail running along the site as well. So then just this month, we received $15,000, which doesn't seem like a lot, from Ohio Southeast. It's a grant to help so that we can work with Bricker Graydon to help prepare our All Ohio Future Fund application. So whereas $15,000 doesn't sound like a lot, if it's a good application, we're looking anywhere in the realm of, we have a lot to decide what's going to be in this ask, what's not, but $25 million to ask from the All Ohio Future Fund for all of these things listed here. Planning, design, water and sewer infrastructure, grading, utility extensions, turn lanes, all that kind of fun stuff. At least I think it's fun. And then in the pipeline, we're also applying for a $500,000 ARC access road grant that would help with site acquisition and right-of-ways out there. So a little update on Albany. And then our spec building project. We spent a lot of time doing this year. I joke with my board. I don't know if I'm ever going to build a building again, but I'm just kidding. I have to. I don't have a choice. But no, it's a 60,000 square foot building, and it's actually even more complete than what you're seeing in this picture. This is just the latest I had when I put these slides together. And important to note that it is expandable up to 120,000 square feet. For those who might not be familiar, this is at the Bill Tyson Industrial Park in the Plains on Poston Road. So right behind, kind of next to and behind Global Cooling. And then the port, because we are a public entity, we have to issue a RFP to select a commercial broker. So we're in that process right now to help, with visibility and marketing of the site. I joke that I thought building the building was the hard work, but now we certainly want to get that building filled. We did have interest from one Athens County company who's not going to proceed. They're still going to invest in an expansion of their own, but not at this facility. So, you know of anyone? Come talk to me. I include this slide every year. It's just the tools and programs that we kind of oversee and manage at the Economic Development Council. So the Tax Incentive Review Council meeting, right? That is the meeting that we put together, and we work closely with the county auditor to review all of the TIPs, enterprise zone agreements, DRDs, and now a community reinvestment area that we have out in Albany. This year 2025 goal is to get the countywide CRA up and running. We do the revolving loan funds as well, so we administer the city and county RLFs. Both of those are the Community Development Block Grant funds, as well as a small business micro RLF, and we did a lot of work throughout 2023 updating policies, those to streamline the RLF application process. Those policies were adopted this year, and we have received 3 applications, which is, more than in the past, and 2 of those are under review pending. And then, yes, we are the local office, local development office that serves as the middleman or middlewoman between the companies we have here and then our Jobs Ohio funding sources, grants, loans, that kind of thing. I include our organizational partners by state and federal, regional, and local. These haven't changed much. If anything, we probably could add a few, right? Nothing happens without strong partnerships. And then looking forward into 2025 and beyond, of course, we need to complete the spec building and secure a tenant, but then we're also looking at, sorry, I keep hitting this. Hope that's not loud for you guys. Looking at what is next in terms of our next site development projects. So the Port Authority doesn't want to slow down. Obviously, the plans in Albany, we could see a couple buildings go up out there. So always looking to what's next. Securing infrastructure for the industrial park and the critical access road in Albany, continuing to explore what strategic partnerships look like with our business and educational institutions to ensure we're meeting the skill set demand that we're seeing from the companies we're trying to expand here or attract here. The Economic Development Council Board has spent a lot of time this year discussing what our role in the housing crisis should be. So we want to continue to support city and county-wide housing initiatives. I obviously serve on the Affordable Housing Commission. I'm tuned in with the Co-Create group. And I think the EDC can be a strong partner in identifying, potential sites for housing developments, the type that align with what the Affordable Housing Commission on the city level and whatever the county's looking for, that meet that vision, and as well as bringing developers to the table. I think we could play a strategic role in that as well. We'll continue to increase lending through our RLF program, city, county, and small business programs. And then, again, we've done a lot, we've spent a lot of time and energy, again, I'm gonna say it again, time well spent, on brownfields assessments. And so we will certainly, we hope that the state continues to fund the brownfield remediation program. We've certainly done a good job of every time they give us a $1 million set aside, we spend it. Go ahead, Sylvie.
You hope to accomplish with that?
Yeah, so, whereas Albany, when we're putting together this vision of what an industrial park's gonna look like out there, we have a pretty defined focus that we want to attract advanced manufacturing companies. I think the Poston Road property, there's a little bit more flexibility. We certainly would love to get a company in there that exists here already that is looking to expand, if we can do that. And then also submit it for any leads that come in through the state, which we already have submitted it for a number of leads. And those industry sectors range. It's whatever the Jobs Ohio priority sectors are. The end goal for the Port Authority is that it needs to be a living wage job. We have to support a company that is going to provide living wage jobs, whether that's in advanced manufacturing or food and ag, or, it could be a variety, whatever sector you want to, pick. But that is, right at the end of the day, the Port Authority is an economic development entity that serves as an extension of the county, and that is its mission, economic development and job creation. So we're flexible. I would say 90% of what we do is business expansion, so businesses that are already here. 10% is attraction. So, and that 10% is essentially when we get leads from the state, we go through our list of sites and see what, do we have anything eligible? Do we have a good site that would fit this company's need? And we submit it. And that's about the 10% that we do for attraction. That's certainly going to have to expand in 2025, right? I'm not going to necessarily sit around and wait for an existing company to be like, hey, I want that. We really need to get someone in there so that we can get that ROI, return on investment, and continue to build new spec buildings that can support other companies. Mm-hmm. Who wants it?
Well, you take a turn first.
All right. So there's been a lot of speculation, and I suspect more than that, that the economy on Columbus Road may really start booming because of the addition of that emergency facility, the medical facility. Mm-hmm. Will your offices be involved in that process?
So we've been involved in a couple projects out there, more so around the brownfields funding. Okay. So 83 Columbus Road, the former gas station, we were able to clean up and demo that with the brownfields funding. And then we're also looking to do this, we're not going to demolish Russell's, but we're going to, assess it and clean it up. I think, I have said this before, I think a lot of the growth out there is going to be somewhat organic because of the Marietta Memorial's presence and a few other things. And I hope it's going to be some smaller businesses too. And the EDC does not have a ton of funding streams for retail-oriented, what we would call population-driven businesses. Not to say that there aren't creative ways in which we can support. I think the brownfields funding is a great example of that. You're not going to attract someone to move into Russell's if it's filled with, petroleum. Mm-hmm. So, and I don't even know if I'm answering your question.
You are. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been fun to you're already starting to see it, some redevelopment out there, and we're excited to be a partner where we can be, where it makes sense for us to be. Yeah.
Well, I guess there's two questions to follow up with hers, and that is, it's my understanding that we've really had a dearth of places for large businesses to come in. So hence the only 10% of new businesses. Mm-hmm. And, but, so I'm glad to hear that you're cleaning up brownfields, because that could make a really big difference on, you know, the amount of properties that could be available for growth and expansion. So that's,
Yeah.
but how do you feel this is going? I mean, if only 10% are coming in new, do you see that expanding?
Yeah, and I don't think that's unique to Athens. I think if you would go around to a lot of communities, I mean, there are outliers, obviously, like, you know, don't go talk to Delaware County or someplace like that. But I think if you talk to most local economic developers, they're going to say a majority of their time spent on growing their existing businesses. That's just where you're going to see the highest number of successful projects. It's easier to support an existing business, and by easier, I mean they're established, they know the community, they like it here, they know things like who they need to reach out to partner with to get a workforce or to post a job. It's a bit more challenging to attract a company, you know, from from California. And maybe I shouldn't give this example. Maybe I shouldn't give this example, but a couple years ago when Global Cooling was acquired by BioLife Solutions, that was a company out of, I think, Washington State. That did not go well for us. Now it's under local ownership again, which we were very excited about. And I'm not saying that I, you know, have a chip on my shoulder with attraction projects. It just seems to be we have more success when we focus on the businesses that are here, committed to Athens and want to expand in Athens.
I do have another question. So this is sort of an affordable housing question, but the Columbus Street area, that corridor, I know that there's some interest in some housing out there, so there's enough employees to, you know, also balance with the number of jobs that we anticipate kind of coming in there. So is that an area that is welcoming or possible for low-income housing, perhaps?
Yeah.
Or worker kinds of housing?
Yeah, I'd say so. It's funny you bring that up. The guys from Spire Development just called me, and they left me a voicemail. I got to call them back, and right because they were thinking about moving the project, or maybe I need to talk to them, but I don't know how set in stone it is. But from out there on Route 50 to Columbus Road, I think for just that reason. So I think, you know, if they're even considering, I'm not no housing expert. I'm learning with help from Solvay. Yeah. But I think if they're even considering that relocation for that project, it's got to be a good sign that that corridor is welcoming of those types of projects. I know that a lot depends on council's appetite for those types of projects too. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, he contacted me too. So
did you talk to him?
I talked to him some weeks ago, so I was wondering, and he was just starting to think about it. So I'm curious to hear what.
I will report back to you after I call him
that.
Tomorrow. Yes, absolutely. Any other questions? They're grilling me, huh? They're grilling me. Yeah.
On the topic of, I have several for you. On the topic of housing, the last time you spoke with us, you mentioned the fact that a lack of housing in all categories is somewhat of a detriment to attracting new business. Has that changed since the last time you visited us?
No, that has not changed. And maybe you saw on behalf of the EDC, I did submit an op-ed to the Athens Independent about this. No, it's a huge hindrance to our ability to. That's another reason, Solvay. I was remiss to not mention this before. It's hard to focus a lot on attraction efforts when you know you cannot support the workforce that those companies coming in would require. It is a big issue. Like I said, it's been a topic of conversation among the EDC a lot this year. And then don't forget, 2 hats. So there's the EDC, but there's the Port Authority. And the Port Authority also has some tools to incentivize and support housing developments. So, for example, you may remember the port issued the bonds for I know there are a lot of opinions about the Woda Cooper project, but that was a kind of creative way that the port could support a housing development through the sales tax savings that the developer receives since the port issued the bond. So we can do things like that through the Port Authority. They have more tools in their toolbox to support projects like that. And you know, the port and economic developers in general, we know the tools. So we know how tax incentives work. We know how to build buildings. I mean, to me, it makes a lot of sense for the port to have some involvement in housing opportunities and housing projects. With my port hat, I'm saying that, not necessarily my EDC hat. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and secondly, over the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've all read the stories in the various media outlets across the state and across the country, forecasting a significant population decline in Appalachia. Fortunately, Athens isn't quite as gray as some of our neighbors to the south. With that in mind, how do you sell Athens, and how do you sell Athens County when businesses look? You're a dying area. I'm not saying we are. Okay, let me say that. I'm not saying that we are. But for someone reading those articles and looking at those charts and seeing us one shade from the darkest color, how do you sell that?
You know, I think we do lean on the university a lot for that selling point. We have talent here that maybe go, you know, I think we have a lot of graduates from the university, from Hockin County, who might, Hockin College, who may stay if the opportunity presents itself. So I think it's capturing those folks and continuing to support company growth so that we have opportunities for them. I think that's a big part of it. Also the cost of living. I always use that argument, and it's not like it's just a talking point. Our cost of living is going to be less than, you know, some of the places you're probably referring to that people are flocking to. And then just getting them here. I think it's important, if we're going the attraction route, to get folks to Athens. If a company is interested in our spec building, I'm not just going to show them the spec building, right? I'm going to spend a day and a half touring them around Athens County and the city of Athens, showing them all of the amenities and wonderful things and the sense of community that we have. So I don't often get to work in that kind of quality of life bucket. Obviously, it's very important when you're trying to attract companies or keep companies. You know, sometimes I think we get very head down, focus on the grants, focus on the tax incentives, focus on that thing, but, you know, you can't turn a blind eye to the quality of life, I think. And things like, you know, you were all aware of the Nationwide Children's facility that we now have here in Athens. I think we need to do a good job of advocating and supporting initiatives like that too, outside of the traditional economic development avenues that we usually take. But that's a good question. It's a challenge. It's not easy work.
The last one's a very easy question.
Oh, good.
There's nothing more depressing to the residents of any town, village, or hamlet than to drive down the main street of that town and see empty storefronts. Recently went to Lexington, Kentucky, and we took the back way and went through a town which I will not name, and 4 out of every 5 downtown properties sat empty. Mm-hmm. You mentioned Ambassador Laundry. Mm-hmm. That's in the city. Here's another one in the city just around the corner, Roller Bowl.
I could add to your list. Yes, we're on the same page. I know. It's tough. And again, the EDC doesn't have a ton of programs or resources for small businesses. We have the Jobs Ohio Small Business Grant that we've been successful with, but that still has to be in a Jobs Ohio priority sector. Roller Bowl, you know, Ambassador Laundry. We are hopefully doing something with Ambassador Laundry. But the pharmacy, you know, those are not examples of companies that we traditionally have been able to help. And I'm with you. It's so important to have vibrant uptown communities. And, you know, last year, I think a good example of where we can be of assistance, and again, I'm not a small business owner. It's immensely challenging to be a small business owner, which might be one reason why we're having this issue. But the Armory project, right? So we were able to get Vibrant Communities funding to that project. And so we're investing in an anchor in a community facility, you know, somewhere that's going to attract and draw people. And we hope that projects like that spur some other organic small business growth around that anchor and in the uptown community. Not an easy question, but an important one. And I don't have a perfect answer for it. And I wish, you know, I was just at a conference, and I'm sorry if I'm getting a little off topic here, but the Ohio Economic Development Association annual conference was in Toledo this year. And there was, I went to a session in Cincinnati, and I can't remember off the top of my head how they fund something like this. And we obviously are not a Cincinnati, but they have a grant program, a whole pot of money that is just for companies or for small businesses who are willing to rehab or improve properties and locate their businesses there. And so in a perfect world, I would have that pot of money that I could give out. It brings me back to 2020 and their first CARES Act bout of money where I'll never forget, Aaron Thomas called me Santa Claus because it was November, December, and I was going around to, Athens County small businesses giving them $10,000. It was like the best thing ever. But if we could have something like that, right, it's not easy to start a small business. And I hate to say it, but places like, Amazon, it's just a click away. It's hard to compete with that. I understand that. Not that we shouldn't continue to try, and we will. But yeah, I don't have a perfect answer for you on that, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, relating to housing, are there other initiatives that we should be considering or supporting? Or are there other things that you're seeing around the state that are other roadblocks we can clear?
I feel like I'm starting to do a deeper dive into what exists elsewhere in the state, what's working, and how can we emulate it. There's not much. There hasn't been a perfect example of how to overcome the housing crisis. One thing I have seen, especially in communities that are college communities, with college towns, I think it's important that we get the university to the table. They are our largest employer. They obviously need folks that work at the university to have housing. And I think it's a challenge for them when they're trying to recruit folks to whatever position at the university, whether it's a leadership position or not. I think that is a challenge for them, so I would certainly like to see them at the table. And I know they have representation on the Affordable Housing Commission, which I'm excited for. But I think that is part of this due diligence phase that we need to undertake, or that I guess I'm just now beginning to take on the due diligence to find what's working elsewhere. Solveig, have you seen anything? I haven't come across anything yet, but and who's to say we can't be the first,
Actually, something came up that I'd like to talk to you about sometime soon, and that's land trusts.
Oh, I would love the idea of a community land trust. I think that is a great potential solution.
So later.
Yeah. The challenge, I think, with the land trust, if anyone's familiar, and again, I'm not an expert, but it essentially allows the land trust to retain ownership of the land, so it brings down the price of the home, making it more affordable. And I think the challenging part with the land trust would be what's the mechanism to acquire the properties or buy the properties? How are we going to fund that in the front end? And once you get it going, it sustains itself. But yeah, I'd love to talk more about that.
Or Ms. Fitzgerald. Yes, Member
I'd
Caldwell.
just like to thank you for all the really hard work and excellent work that you do, Molly.
That is very nice of you. Thank you. It's some days it's fun.
That's good.
No, I appreciate your time, and I do think now more than ever it's important to do what we can on a local level. So I'm happy to do it, and hope that the city continues to be a long-standing partner of the EDC. So, thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.
Oh, there's us. We got new staff photos.
Oh, nice.
You won't see it anymore, but we got a beautiful new staff photo. So thank you. You have my contact info.
Thank you very much. We will be moving on to the rest of the Finance and Personnel Committee agenda. So I would ask that Chair Reisner, members Wood, Clodfelter, and McCary stay on the dais. And
Can I just interject something here? The topic that we're discussing here is contract renewal, and we haven't discussed that at all. So I really think we should.
please, this is your committee. Please move forward.
Okay, well, let's see, with the new procedure, we go to administration first?
You can present the issue.
Okay,
So
and I have.
Okay.
All right.
You have dollar figures or?
No, I have nothing at all. That's what I want to find out.
Okay, well, then you could ask the city administration about
You
an
know anything?
EDC contract renewal.
I don't mean to be flippant about the whole thing, but, we've paid the same amount of money to the EDC for several years now. We're one of three primary funders. The city of Athens, Athens County, and Ohio University. We've placed $60,000 in the budget. I don't know that there's necessarily a council requirement to now that it is below the $75,000 threshold for individual authorization, but we're just doing it the same way that we do it every year. And I think given that this is functionally a council of governments or a cooperative endeavor between three large entities in the county, I'd recommend that you continue to support this initiative. Perhaps you don't have to. Perhaps now that $60,000, that'd be a question for the law director. I didn't realize you were going to ask that question, or else I would have been better prepared.
Sorry.
Treasurer, anything to add?
Nothing? Oh, no facts, figures, interest rates or anything. Okay, audience, the experts out there. Now we can go to council.
I just have a question. Is this funded similarly that we're required to, like the Visitors Bureau? Or is this a choice?
It's a choice.
I mean, it's a good choice, in my opinion, but I
I
just
would
wasn't
agree.
sure.
Gladfelder?
Also, Director Stone, if you don't mind, do you know from what part of the city budget the $60,000 has come in the past?
This money comes from the general fund. We specifically appropriate it to what we call other admin, which is 101, 120. If you look at your budget documents, and it goes into all the various entities that we pay money to that are external to the city to be part of, say, the our contribution to the health department, or various contributions to boards and commissions or things. We stick them all in that 101, 120. Orca is a good example, but the EDC is a line item in 101, 120.
Any other questions from this committee? No? Well, I think that concludes this topic.
Okay, now we'll go just to the regular Finance and Personnel Committee members. Reisner,
Right.
Wood, Clodfelter, McCary, thank you.
Let's see. Well, let's see, next on the agenda is the sale of SREX. And if you'll bear with me, at about 8 o'clock this morning, I decided, spur of the moment, to make a PowerPoint presentation about this. If I can find it.
While you're looking, Member Reisner, I'll just say that in the almost 8 years on council I've been with you, I haven't seen you prepare a PowerPoint. I'm very impressed. This may happen in your first 8 years on council, but well done. Thank you. We'll see.
Well,
We can see it down here, Member Reisner, yep.
Yes. It's on the screen in front of you.
just trying to get it to go into slideshow.
You had it from yeah.
Play from start. You're a genius. Okay. Well, SREX, what are they? And by the way, this is the first time I've done a PowerPoint in 14 years. SREX, like everything else, is an abbreviation, anagram for solar renewable energy credits. And so what are they? Well, let's find out. There we go. Okay, we said that's solar energy credits. And what these are, it's an attempt to incentivize green energy, green power. And it's a way of having communities that are generating renewable, usually solar power, to take those, take that, I don't know how to describe it. Okay, solar array generates electric power. Depends on the size of the array, a number of SRECs will be created. One SREC is created for every megawatt hour of electric produced. And the SRECs have a dollar value depending on where they can be sold. So essentially what's happening is, as you're generating electric power through our grid, you are creating an item, a commodity that can be sold, bought, transferred to other communities who have no green energy whatsoever, no production, but they would like to take advantage of programs that says, well, you have to have renewable energy. Well, how do we do that? We don't have that here. Well, we will buy these SRECs credits and say, see, we are green. We have these SRECs. We are contributing to, to a greener world. So here, what it comes down to is they become commodities. And a commodity is just it's like gold, currency, oil, wheat, spices, coffee, frozen concentrated orange juice, if you ever saw trading places, okay? Chicago Mercantile Exchange, there it was, commodities. So in a sense, these are intangible things. You don't see them. They're not like a bag of coffee. What they are is just simply a credit that's generated. And somewhat like, I like to use the analysis of, or comparison of like a Bitcoin. You've never seen one, and you never will. But they somehow exist, and they are sold and bought and traded. And they have value, which gets us to this part. Oh, not too far. There we go. Their dollar value depends on where they are sold. And this is getting kind of weird because from what I understand, when SRECs were first created, the market was pretty much countrywide. But now the state legislature has said, no, wait a minute, we don't want Ohio SRECs sold to just anybody. We will only allow them to be sold to states that are immediately adjacent to our state. So Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Michigan, Indiana, West Virginia can buy them, or entities within those states can buy them. Nobody else. There's several reasons why they did that. It's kind of, you'd be speculating as to the exact motive why they would do it. But what's interesting is the price. If City of Athens would decide to sell their SRECs to an entity within the state of Ohio, it'd be worth about $3 per SREC. But if we sold them in the adjacent state of Pennsylvania, it would be $31.25. Now, from what I understand, before all this changed a few years ago, if we sold these in the state of Delaware or Maryland, we would be getting $310 per SREC.
Wow.
But now we can't. So about $31 is nothing to sneeze at if you have a lot of SRECs to market. So this is what we could do. The city of Athens, at the moment, with the amount of megawattage that we're producing, could be producing SRECs with a value of somewhere between $86,000 to $92,000 per year.
Is that assuming we're selling them in Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Okay.
Why would you want to sell them in Ohio?
Yeah, yeah.
They don't deserve it. So there we go. The end. A ready kilowatt production. What I wanted to do was just give a background, explain what an SREC is. Now, once we have that established, the thing for now is that the administration would like to begin selling these, getting some equity out of the fact that we're producing them and we're getting credit for them. We haven't done it in the past, and unfortunately, apparently, we can't sell what we've already done. It's only going forward now once we establish a way of selling them. And from what I've been told, the way that's done is you have to have a broker. So now we're back in the good old days of the stock market when if you wanted to buy 10 shares of AT&T, you had to go to a brokerage firm. You go to JP Morgan or the Ohio Company or something. Now they changed that. Now you can do it with, E-Trade or something. But not with SREX. You have to go through a brokerage firm. So the city would have to, and Director Stone can correct me if I'm wrong on this, will have to establish some sort of brokerage account with a firm that specializes in the selling of SREX. And then we have to make decisions about what kind of program we would want to get involved with to sell them off. What would be the best way for the city of Athens to take advantage of this and generate, well, it's not an insignificant amount of money, considering that the budget has been very tight. Any little bit will help. What I'm hoping is that along with the legislation that will come forward from the administration is that we will use the funds that are being generated to produce more green energy and value here within the city. I mean, it'd be easy to take $90,000, put it into the general fund, and then it'll just disappear. You know, there'll always be something that says, we really need that for this or that or something. Personally, I would like to see it go for more, well, producing more green energy, paying off the loans and the debts that we've already accumulated to make the power that we're generating now. That would be nice to pay those things off quick. Perhaps more charging stations, more green vehicles, more, I mean, just think about all the things we could do. Mm-hmm. And especially if, as we're generating the power and selling off the SREX, the funds could increase. We don't necessarily have to spend them immediately. They could allow them to build up. Perhaps there's someone in our Treasury Department who's good at investing and could, you know, make little dollars into big ones. Here we go. So that's all for my presentation, and I'll go back up there and sit down and we'll discuss this. Okay, now I go to Mr. Stone.
Thank you. Member Eisner stole all my thunder and basically presented everything that I was going to present to you through an outstanding presentation explaining the concept of SREX. The City of Athens produces, we believe, somewhere in the range of 26,000 to almost 39,000 megawatt hours of electricity per year. And so, and that's if you look at the various arrays that we have in the city, both current and future. So we currently have arrays at the wastewater plant, at the pool, on the roof of the community center, at the water treatment plant, on the parking lot of the community center, and soon to have arrays on the armory, which is ultimately a CIC asset, but still functionally in the city of Athens, the parking garage, and the fire station. So those 8 arrays are really what we're talking about when we talk about that number of megawatt hours. We'd like to market these SRECs, and we'd like to ask your permission to market these SRECs, and ultimately we're going to send forward an ordinance that authorizes the administration to market the SRECs through a brokerage. There's a number of different ways, as Member Iser noted, and ultimately you make a kind of a snap decision, like, you know, do you lock in for 3 years? Do you lock in for 3 years with part of your material or part of your arrays, and then for 5 years for the other ones? Do you do a month-to-month arrangement? And really, that's kind of a reading of the markets and how you decide to do that. So our plan right now with the revenue that comes from the selling of these SRECs or the leasing ultimately of these SRECs, because they won't be sold permanently, is to remit that money to the Capital Improvements Fund 580. And our thinking with the Capital Improvements Fund is it's not completely sequestered to where if there was an absolute emergency, you could use it to do something that was not renewable energy related, but by and large, it won't get swallowed up in the mix of the larger amount of money that goes into the general fund that gets spent on any number of different things. And so 580 Capital is the reason, or is the location we'd like to remit these funds to as they come in. What we'd like to do with these ultimately is allow them to build for about 6 years, and then in combination with the revenue that's generated from these SRECs in 6 years, plus the carbon fee money that is building at SOPEC, that at the end of that 6-year period, that's when we will be allowed to exercise the option to purchase the solar array at the wastewater plant, on the pool, and on the roof of the community center. And my hope is that there will be enough revenue generated from both the SRECs and that carbon fee that we won't have to have a major capital outlay or taking on any debt in 6 years when we go to buy out those power purchase agreements for those arrays that we put in. So that's our ultimate plan. Whether I'm here or not, or to be able to do that, I think there'll be enough people that will remember that that's what our goal is with this revenue coming in, so that we kind of keep it protected for 6 years, and then the time comes we can go ahead and make that buyout. That was something, if you remember, we negotiated the option to buy at 6 years once Kokosing Solar was able to realize all of the tax incentives associated with the construction of those 3 arrays during the power purchase agreement. So that's my pitch to you. The legislation will come forward, next week, allowing or asking you to allow the administration to market these SRECs.
Treasurer, you have anything to chip in?
All I would add to that is that in all the conversations, we've already basically got it set up that as soon as the money comes in from the SRECs, we will go into 580 in terms of where it goes as a fund. But physically, I'm going to take that money and we're going to put it in an investment account. We'll set up a totally separate account with our Red Tree Investment Group and let that money every year, put more money into it and just let it build for 6 years. So again, when we hit that 6-year period, not only will we have the money that we received, but we will hopefully have some interest and some, extra money.
Mm-hmm. Other members of our council's last, right? In all this?
Public is
Public,
next.
okay. Here's JQ.
I like that Ready Kilowatt Illuminating Company up in Northeast Ohio. Alan Swank, 40 Townsend Place. Questions. If we're generating 26,000 to 39,000 a year, and we can get $30 a rec in Pennsylvania, that's $900,000 a year.
No. 2,627 to 3,894 SRECs. So an SREC.
Oh, 2,000. I'm sorry, I thought you said 26,000.
Right.
That's my mistake. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that drops it down to 90,000.
Yeah, that'd be a wonderful.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I misunderstood what you said. Is that net? Because I assume there's brokerage fees with this. That would be net.
Right.
Okay.
They're brokerage fees.
Okay. The original purpose of RECs was to encourage people to not buy them, but to take the money that those RECs generated to produce more green energy. And personally, putting it into 580, I think, is a good idea, but I think we really need to have a very, very tight ordinance, like real tight, maybe to the point that money can't be touched. As Mr. Stone said, he may or may not be here in 4 years. We may or may not have a new mayor, because we now have a new president. And who knows what that person might want to do if that money can be touched. So I think that's something that the council should seriously consider, making that as tight as possible, because with administrative changes, council changes, things can change. And again, the original purpose of the REC program in the United States of America was to encourage communities to build as much solar or wind or whatever as they could, and by selling the RECs, continue to do that. And to do otherwise isn't really the real purpose of this program. Thank you.
Anyone else? No. Our committee, yes. Mayor Klopfelder.
Thank you for the promotion. Like Alan, I would like to see, or like Member Swank, I would like to see this limited. I think that's a good use of the money to be able to buy those panels from Kokosing. But I think it would be wise for us to think beyond those 6 years. And I like what Member Reisner said about maybe putting in more charging stations, buying more electric cars for the city fleet, maybe even doing some energy efficiency improvements, if those could be woven into the solar parameters. But to try to do what we can now to make sure that these would be used for renewable energy or things that would help the climate even beyond those 6 years. And if we can figure out how to word that in an ordinance. Because I think it's an excellent idea to sell them. And hopefully it could really benefit and this community and make us an even greener place to live.
McCarry?
Thanks. I have two questions. The first is, can you talk a little bit about, Director Stone, the process of purchasing our SRECs? Would it be something that's entirely administrative, or each time there's a purchase, do we hear about it? What happens?
I think I understand the question, Councilmember McCary. It would not come back to you. So basically, it would be for a period of time where we would, you give the authority to the administration. Perhaps we could put something in the ordinance that we need to report back on some sort of regular basis to say kind of what has occurred with that. But we would not come back to seek more authority to market it in the future. And the reason for that is kind of that rolling nature to say, okay, hey, okay, lock in 3 years now for this half. Okay, lock in 5 years now, or okay, we're going to do month to month with these, and our understanding from speaking to the one broker that we've talked to so far is you kind of have to make a decision, when the market is correct to get the best return.
Thanks. My other question, can you say anything about the demand that we would anticipate for these sales?
Sure. I wonder, we would have done better if we had sold these a couple months ago. But, that's neither here nor there at this point. As we understand now, there's continuing demand for green energy in the markets where we're allowed to sell. And we don't think with the overall demand for energy in the United States increasing, that the demand for green energy is going to decrease regardless of larger policy at the state and federal level. So I'd like to think that by the time you pass this ordinance, we'll be in a position that we can go ahead. And the big question is, how long do you lock in for, right? It's like interest rates, right? Do you do an adjustable rate and then wait for a few years and then think you'll get a better deal, or do you go and lock something and say, this is what I got, and then subsequently you're tied up and maybe prices rise. So to remember Reisner's point about commodities, like pork bellies or something, it's possible 2 years pork bellies would be worth more, and we made a bad decision, but we'll do the best to take the advice from people who see the market. We'll speak with SOPEC, and they see the market pretty well. Certainly the brokerage that we work with sees the market as well. So.
Thank you.
Member Wood.
Yes, I was thinking about the project we have currently with the solar array over the community center, and buying that out and that type of thing. You mentioned the goal of buying out the Kokosing things in 6 years. Arguably, those will lose production power as well, right? I mean, they do degrade. Is it nuts to think about, building whole new arrays for ourselves with the money and trying to energy beget energy sort of thing, or is that,
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Member Wood. To draw a distinction between the two arrays on the community center, there's the one that were built in 2010 that you just authorized money to buy out. We currently don't, until we buy that out, we don't have the right to sell those RECs. Back in 2010, we gave away that right. And so when we're buying out the remaining 6 years or so on that power purchase agreement from the current owner, we're buying not only the physical infrastructure, but we're also buying the right to sell those RECs. And so as I look at the number that we're working with, I'm anticipating us buying those and then being able to turn around and sell those. Insofar as the array on the roof of the community center is concerned, when we negotiated that power purchase agreement from Kokosing Solar, we were a lot smarter, and we said, we're going to retain the ability to sell the RECs. And so that's something that we did not allow the builder of that array to keep. Builder owner of that array to keep. We retain that, and that was part of the. And again, that just comes from learning about the value of these. And so like when you talk about the remaining life in something, everything is kind of built around a 20-year design life. We know they last 25, 30 years, really, although the panels do get better over time. If you look at the panels we have at the lot in the community center, you could probably have that same amount of square footage and produce twice as much power. We are limited to a certain extent when we're working behind the meter. The utility will not allow us to perpetually make more electricity than is used by the facility. The intent is that you're making at or below the amount, and that's just the way that the law is for basically behind the meter arrays. The idea is if you're going to stay attached to the meter, at some point you need to be taking energy off the grid. You can't perpetually be selling power to the grid. If you were, you'd be a power station, right? And that's a whole other level of regulation, and we're not a power station. Building other sites, certainly, I think we could do the math at the time when 6 years came along, and we could say, okay, there's this much life left in these arrays. Right now, they are costing the city, X hundred of thousands of dollars a year in the case of the wastewater plant, X tens of thousands of dollars a year for the case of the community center and the pool. Does it make sense to go ahead and use this pool of cash to buy those out and remove those costs from the rec fund and the wastewater fund? Or does it make sense to instead go and build more and continue to have the wastewater fund and the rec fund pay the electricity at an escalating rate? Because if you remember, there's an escalator clause in that to Kokosing Solar. So really, it's a math problem 6 years from now. As far as what recommendation that I would have or whatever administration is sitting here in 6 years would have.
Member Clodfelder, did you have a question?
I did. What was it? Oh my gosh. I pass.
Member McCary.
All right. I was wondering, is this anything so new that we would need to update our latest version of the sustainability plan, or is this part of the Sustainability Commission's work?
So it is a metric included in the sustainability plan that this will be included in the amount of renewable energy that the city is producing. Doesn't change the plan at all, just updates the metrics.
Okay, thank you.
Member Clodfelder.
The question I was going to ask. Director Stone, you said important things about the timing of this, and it sounds like you might wait months before you put the money in, just depending on when the market's the best. But are you hoping we'll do this on an emergency basis?
As far as passing the ordinance to allow?
As far as,
No.
creating and passing an ordinance?
No,
Or no?
I'm not asking for that.
Okay.
We will sell immediately. We just might sell in a month-to-month arrangement. And then, so we have the ability to shift in the ensuing couple months. But once this passes, we'll not sell. Sell's the incorrect term. Lease specifically. Okay. So we may lease in a month-to-month basis. There's a lower amount that you get as opposed to if you lock in for a 3-year or a 5-year period. But like as soon as we can start generating revenue from this, we'll do so, but we'll make a decision maybe to do it from month to month for a couple months if it looks like, if the advice that we're getting at the time is, hey, maybe you should wait a couple months before you lock in. Or we might lock in immediately as soon as you pass this.
And follow up to that, if I may, back to the question that was asked previously about how this would be managed. Do you anticipate that us leasing these solar renewable energy credits will take up time of city employees?
Thanks for the question. We have, my deputy has spent a tremendous amount of time already in researching this. However, our hope is that we would identify our brokerage, and once we establish the GATS accounts, which is the thing that names your SRECs basically and says this is what you have, that it pretty much will be a fire and forget type arrangement where you select a brokerage and you say, here you go, market these, and then they turn around back to us, 3 years later when the term is up and say, hey, your term is about up. What do you want to do? And that would be really where the management would be, and after we get it rolling.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Reisner, in your presentation, you explained that communities that might lease these SRECs would do so because they might have something they're applying for that requires them to demonstrate some sort of engagement with renewable energy. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I was wondering, are the projects that they're applying for all intended to help them be more energy efficient? Does anyone know that? If they're...
No, I don't know. I do know that there's some situations like, I'm trying to think what it was. I'm sorry, it's escaping me, but where by a regulation, a company was required that a certain percentage of their energy portfolio had to be green. The way they achieved that portion was to lease SRECs from people like us so that their portfolio would now meet the regulation. So they're probably not doing it out of any thought about helping the environment or being green or anything. It's just simply because they're required to do it. And in order to meet the regulations, that's one way they achieve it. So as soon as I think of where I read about that, I'll let you know. Maybe the director knows.
I think I can maybe help answer the question that I think you were asking, which is if we sell our SRACs, does that mean that somebody else gets to claim credit for the energy that we're producing, and then we're back to using energy that is not green? And I would argue that as a member of SOPEC, where we have 100% green product of what we're buying off of the grid, that ultimately this is money we're leaving on the table if we don't do this.
Actually, both of you were helpful. Thank you.
Member Crow?
So this might help explain this a little bit. Ohio University purchases its electricity with 100% SRECs, which means that all of the electricity that the Ohio University is purchasing is coming from renewable sources. So that Ohio University can claim the carbon reduction credit of being associated, of its electricity being associated with renewable energy, even though they're not behind the meter like we're talking about here. These are wind farms in Texas that have RECs, and so we pay a premium, we pay more, Ohio University pays a higher per kilowatt hour price than you could get directly from AEP, because we're paying that little extra to fund additional renewable energy projects. So it's really a way to sort of take credit for renewable energy, even though you're not, unlike the city of Athens, you're not yourself generating that electricity. And just a few quick points, and then we'll move on if Member Reisner is okay. I want to, applaud the city administration and council as well for negotiating in the deal with Kokosing the retaining of these SRECs. That was something that the city administration learned over the 10 or 12 years since we did the solar array at the community center, and that was very intelligent. I also want to simply ask that it does seem to be that there are a couple of council members who like the idea of a green revolving fund of sorts, that this money being placed in one place where it can be used only for renewable energy projects or connected projects. Director Stone has recommended 580, and I didn't know if that was to give more flexibility, or if there was an administrative from an investment standpoint about your recommendation to place it in 580.
580 is a relatively restricted fund that you use for capital only. Can't pay salaries, can't pay operating costs. You're paying for capital improvements out of 580, and that's by design of the fund. It kind of self-imposes the restrictions, but doesn't require the auditor's office to create yet another special fund. And so that was kind of my thinking with that selection. Certainly, if you wanted to put more restrictions or less restrictions or more guidance into the ordinance, we're open for that. That's just my recommendation.
And I would just add that if the auditor were here, I know that she would probably mention, she's mentioned a number of times to me that the state doesn't necessarily like us creating more and more funds for different things all the time. That if we have a capital fund, that's what it's for, that's kind of what we should use it for.
Thank you. Member Reisner.
Any other discussion on this topic? If not, we'll move on to 2025 staffing. This is where the director comes in again.
Are we ready? Okay. There was a document that you received a couple weeks ago relative to mayor's office staffing only. The document that you have now is ultimately what you see every year, which is a staffing ordinance. It's a big spreadsheet that looks like this that shows the various FTEs and where they go against what fund in the city. Of note, the one that you received recently today that we would bring forward with the 2025 staffing ordinance next week includes the changes the mayor requested to the mayor's office staffing. That doesn't preclude you passing that if you would pass it, simply because we'd like to go ahead and make the hiring decisions that related to the mayor's office that he wants to do prior to the regular order that I would ask you to take the overall staffing ordinance and pass. The couple notes that you'll see in the overall staffing ordinance, the other changes that are reflected beyond what the mayor talked about last week include changes to positions in the law director's office, not changes to quantity in the law director's office. So specifically, instead of having a chief prosecutor and assistant law director / part-time prosecutor, it would go to 2 prosecutors, 1 assistant law director, staffing in the law director's office. So same quantity of people, just some title changes. The other thing that's of note here, that's you've not seen before, is ultimately we took the Ohio Revised Code speaks about positions in the municipal court that the legislative authority is authorized to set the quantity and pay for, and positions in a municipal court that the court is allowed to set the quantity and pay for. And so never in the history of, since I've been here anyway, have we reflected the positions in the municipal court that the legislative authority is authorized to set the quantity and pay for in the staffing ordinance. So we went ahead and did that this year. And it also is reflected in the non-union pay and benefits ordinance as far as the various pay grades where those particular positions are. And so those are reflected here, and you can see specifically where out of 101, 106, which is general fund, as well as 237 and 235 funds, 237, 235, and 232 funds, and how many FTEs are funded out of those particular funds. But this is just kind of a function, and we've talked about it in our the Finance and Personnel Administration meeting is there's some push-pull between the various branches of government about what authorities that the judge holds in the judiciary and what authority you hold in the legislature, and and ultimately this is an effort for the legislature to exert their authority that they have. If you flip to the back or the second page, this is just part-time positions, and the only shift there with yellow for last year is moving one of the mayor's office intern positions that are authorized to the code office. Because functionally, that's kind of what we're doing anyway, and we thought it'd be more appropriate to put it there. But at the end of the day, it's all general fund money, so it doesn't matter that much. Overall, the staffing ordinance actually reduces the number of employees for the city of Athens vice 2024, slightly.
Thank you. Hunter, have anything? All right. Treasurer?
No.
expect to see the auditor. Audience. I guess we'll go to the committee here. Member Clodfelder.
Director Stone, could you be more specific about by how much the staffing levels will be reduced in 2025?
Sure, it's not, FTE wise, it's not a lot. I think it's roughly a quarter of an FTE, but it's not a huge quantity. Again, we fluctuate quantities, like, we never have all of the people employed that you identify here because, you can't have two people at once, right? So once somebody leaves, you have a period of time of hiring where the position remains vacant. It's authorized by this, but it remains vacant while you're doing hiring.
Any other members? Member Crowell.
Thank you, Member Reisner and Service Safety Director Stone. If I'm reading the handout correctly, it looks like in the Law Director's office, there would be the elimination of the Chief City Prosecutor, and the Assistant Law Director would no longer be a part-time prosecutor. So the Law Director's office would have 2 secretaries, the prosecutor, and the Assistant Law Director. Is that correct?
Correct, plus the elected official.
Plus Law Director herself. Thank you. And then down to the courts, the final 101.106 General Municipal Court Security, that's not the bailiff, correct? The bailiff is one of those, is that, I thought the bailiff, when we looked at this, was one of the court.
I don't know the answer to
Positions.
that question.
Okay.
I will get the answer to that, President Crowell.
Thank you. Thank you, Member Reisner.
Member Wood, anything? Well, in that case, ordinance next Monday then. Let's see, moving on, the 2025 third-party health insurance administrator.
Sure. My turn?
Yes.
Thank you, Member Reisner. What you have before you ultimately is Exhibit A, which is the fees associated with our agreement for third-party administrator. We can continue to recommend use of Employee Services Benefit Company, ESBC, as our third-party administrator. There's a slight increase from last year, which is for medical claims management services. If you look at that second block on the document you have in Exhibit A, last year it was 20, or this year, 2024, it was $23.50 per claim. They'd like to go to $24.50 per claim next year. When we do a forecast for what we think, because you never really know, claims wise and such, we anticipate that this will be about a $3,000 increase over the term of the year. So, which is not a lot of money given the amount of money we spend on medical care.
Treasurer? Nope. Audience? Members of the committee? No? Okay. Well, in that case, we'll move on to the 2025 group excess loss medical insurance. I'll turn to Director Stone.
Sure, thank you, Member Reisner. So the other, if you think about healthcare costs for a workforce, there's really 3 big buckets of cost. There's administration, which we just talked about. There's claims for a self-insured system like we are, which is the bulk of the cost, and ultimately that's the amount of money you pay to the medical providers. And then there's the stop-loss insurance. And so what this specifically is the stop-loss insurance, and this is the cost of premiums that the city pays in order to carry insurance for claims for single individuals that go beyond $110,000 for a given year. So every year we go out to bid on our workforce, and basically our third-party administrator oversees this bid. They put information about our workforce out onto the market. Reinsurance or stop-loss insurance carriers will bid on it and subsequently give us terms. We had 3 bidders this year. Our current carrier, which is Sirius Point American Insurance Company, as well as 2 other bidders. Those 2 other bidders were, one moment, Standard Life, and the other is Gerber Life. So those are the three bidders. The lowest of the three was Sirius. Again, the existing carrier for us. A slight increase in cost, we believe, over the course of the year. And the reason for that actually is because we have a higher number of people, census that are included. So our individual premiums actually drop 4 cents per insured per month from 3 cents. No, 4 cents, from $14.05 per individual down to $14.01 per individual. However, our workforce is skewing younger and subsequently with larger families. So the number of insured that we're carrying going into 2025 is roughly 35 to 40 individuals, if you count kids and spouses, greater than what we had last year. So there will be a slight increase in overall cost because of that, but ultimately the individual premiums are a little bit less.
To the audience? I'll go to the committee. Any comments about stop loss? No? Okay. I believe that then concludes finance and personnel.
Thank you, Member Reisner. We now will move on to Committee of the Whole. We have 2 items under Committee of the Whole. The first to discuss is a proposed income tax increase. The current income tax in the city of Athens is 1.95%. In December of 2016, it was 1.65%. As the city continues to take a close look at its finances and its general fund balance and its cash balance, we're looking for ways to have more money for the city. And so we were looking at raising the income tax rate. The biggest issue is that we receive much less money from Ohio University in 2024 than we have in the past. In 2008, Ohio University paid 42% of the city of Athens income tax revenue, and in 2023 they pay 29% of that income tax revenue. As we all know, about 45% of our fire runs are going to the Ohio University campus. So we'd like to discuss a possible increase of the income tax, and I know Director Stone has a number of documents he can share with us.
Sure, thank you, President Crow. I have a document here, if I could take one and pass those down, if you don't mind. I also sent an electronic version of this today.
I got mine. I'm good.
This is the one that
Yeah, I got it.
it's got that.
Oh, you got, oh, okay.
See it easier.
That's fine.
So there's a lot of data identified here, and certainly this will be available for everybody who wants to have it afterwards. But what I intend to do is walk you through the data on this to make a case for why we should consider an income tax increase for the city of Athens. And before I get started, I fully recognize that it's a fairly significant decision to pass on a tax increase to the voters. In this particular case, we're talking about general revenue. We're not talking about for a specific thing, so it's a little bit more nebulous of a case to make for why voters should or why workers in the city of Athens should pay more income tax. Ultimately, this is not a decision that the council gets to make individually. The council just gets to make the decision to put it on the ballot, and ultimately the voters would have to make this decision. What we're recommending from the administration perspective is to put it on to the spring ballot, and so I think with timelines This is something to discuss over the next couple months, and with the goal of getting it to the Board of Elections sometime in the late January timeframe. So I think it could go through the end of the year if you didn't end up voting on whether or not to place it on the ballot before the end of December, but probably pretty early on in the beginning of January, you'd want to take action as to whether or not to place it on the ballot if you wanted to get it into that spring event. So there's several different graphs identified here, and I'm going to start at the top and walk your way down. The first graph has both some good news and some bad news on it. And so the first graph, and what I've done here is using the Consumer Price Index, I've taken everything and I've adjusted for the graphs that you see to make it in 2023 dollars. So when you're looking at those 2008 dollars, that's using the Consumer Price Index and moving that forward, and it's really adjusted for inflation. So the actual numbers, if you were to go out and pull the reports from 2008, there would be a lower number on that income tax take, but I pulled it forward to just adjust it for inflation, just so that we've got an apples to apples comparison. The blue in that first graph is Ohio's GDP over that 15-year period, or that 2008 to 2023 period, and Ohio's done pretty well. Ohio's done pretty well since 2008. It's reflective of the larger economy, and over the term has grown about 24% in real terms, not after making an adjustment for inflation. So Ohio's GDP has done really well. That GDP is identified on the right-hand side as the graph to say what that amount is. On the left-hand side of the graph, that axis. That y-axis there is the amounts for the City of Athens income tax take. And if you look over the same period of time, we've experienced a 28% growth. So you look at it and you say, we've actually done better than the Ohio GDP as far as the amount of income tax that we've brought in over the time. And that those lines that you see above the graphs, that's just a trend line to try to deal with and smooth out the variations between individual years. But wait, there's a caveat to that 28% growth, which is in 2017 we instituted a 0.2% hike to the income tax, and then again in 2023 with the public safety capital levy we instituted a 0.1% income tax growth. And so if I were to back out that income tax growth associated with those increases that were voted on, both by the public in 2017 or 2016 that took effect in 2017, and then by the public again in 2023, we actually only experienced an 8.6% growth in 2023 dollars over this 15-year time. So we're growing slower in Athens than the overall Ohio GDP. That takes me to the next graph, which is part of the reason why I believe that we're growing slower. So there are two bars in each of the years. The blue bar is the City of Athens total income tax take. So at the end of the year, the amount of income tax that the city has brought in. And where that income tax goes is a variety of sources, right? It goes to the general fund, it goes to the street fund, it goes to the rec fund, it goes to the transit fund, it goes to these individual levies that are put in place. But bottom line is that's the total amount that's come in by income tax. The green line is the amount of money that has been withheld from Ohio University. And the way I had to get that was by a public records request to Ohio University. And this is specifically for the Athens campus. Now, what those green lines don't give you is the amount of money that was refunded to Ohio University personnel if they were to apply for income tax refunds. And where that is most significant is in the most recent years after the change in state law that allowed people to pay income tax where they physically were when they were working versus where the address of their employer was. And so that was something that went into effect after COVID that ultimately allowed for the work from home personnel at Ohio University or any employer in the city of Athens to get a refund for amounts that their employer has withheld from their paychecks for that period of time that they weren't physically present when they were working. In I think last year in 2023, Ohio University has established a structure, and some of you who are more familiar with them probably know it better than me, where they basically look at what your work schedule is and say, okay, you work from home 50% of the time, so we're only going to withhold 50% of your revenue. So we shouldn't in future years, at least from Ohio University, see as high of refunds It doesn't mean that the people are paying the taxes. It just means that they're not withholding them in the first place. So, but the big takeaway from this second graph is in that line across the top, and that shows the percentage of the city's total income tax that OU is paying. And again, it doesn't reflect in these recent years for those, and there's not a way that I can tease out, because that's individual taxpayer information, how much more is refunded to Ohio University people. But the bottom line is there's a decrease. And as President Crowell mentioned, in 2008, Ohio University was 42%. Ohio University employees, that is, were 42% of the income tax withholdings paid to the city of Athens, and in 2023, they're only 29%. There is a little bit of a silver lining to that information, which is, we are less reliant on the company in this company town than we were in 2008. But functionally, that's what Athens is, right? It's like a giant Ford factory right over at the end of Court Street. It's just not a Ford factory, it's a state university. And over the last 15 years, the amount of the revenue that's come in from income tax from employees at Ohio University has decreased. If you look at it for inflation-adjusted numbers, and you look at that third column from the end on that table at the bottom, Ohio University is actually paying $500,000 less in income tax in 2023 dollars in 2023 than they were in 2008. And so, you could say they're doing a great job from an efficiency perspective in running a university with paying less in wages. But at the end of the day, the city of Athens is deriving less revenue, which makes it that much more important that we diversify our economy and try to grow our income tax revenue. The next table down is one of the it's just one example of increasing costs. All I did was take medical costs for employees over the term from 2008 through 2023, adjusted it for 2023 dollars, and you notice over that 15-year period, there's been a 58% increase in medical costs. The next piece of data to the right of that third graph are other notable cities in Ohio and what their current income tax rates are. So the three C's are at 2.5%, 2.5%, and 2.1%. Lancaster, just up the road from us, is at 2.3%. Akron is at 2.5%. Toledo's at 2.5%. There are a couple other communities that are lower, Zanesville and Marietta, than we are at 1.95%. A couple of the college towns are located as far as what their amounts are. Dayton is at 2.5%. So what we're recommending as an administration is that we increase the income tax by 0.3% to a 2.25% overall. That additional 3%, if I were to apply it to the 2023 income tax numbers, would have generated or would generate an additional roughly $2.6 million. Obviously that gets split among a variety of places based on when that comes in. That's the total amount. Some goes to the individual levies. It doesn't go to the individual levies that are specific, but that ultimately goes into the unrestricted funds, and then that income tax mix decides which amounts go to which funds. A couple reasons why I think that you should consider this. One of the large reasons is the potential for the Ohio Police and Fire Pension Fund employer share to increase. I think the auditor has talked about this a little bit. We are members of Ohio Municipal League. Ohio Municipal League is fighting this initiative at the state level, but that particular pension fund initially recommended both police and fire employers have 26% of the contribution come from employer share. Basically, the employer takes 6% of their pay and then gives it to the pension fund as pension pay. They backed off that request, and they decided to keep fire where it was at 24%, and then just ask for an increase of police from 19.5% to 24%. And I don't have an exact number, but I can get that to say what that will cost if that passes at the state legislature. But, I think because of that, backing off of that initial request, I don't have a lot of hope that the legislature will keep it where it is, although, other entities are beyond just the Ohio Municipal League are pushing back against that, specifically county commissioners associations associated with sheriff's departments, and any local government that employs police officers obviously is going to feel a tremendous amount of pain. But that pension fund seems to think that they need more revenue. And so that will be a big hit to the city. There's a couple potential preemptions that we could see in the ensuing years at the state level. Number one, where the state goes and sets a cap on municipal income tax, and and doesn't let local government increase it, either above a certain amount or increase it without authority from the state or something along those times. And maybe that's a little bit of catastrophizing. I'd like to think that enough local governments would push back against something like that wouldn't happen, but you never know. Likewise, the centralized collection of a municipal income tax is something that we've heard about perpetually, that if that were to occur, there would be some sort of state share of an administrative fee associated with collecting that we would see a little bit of loss in revenue for that. A couple other things that I would recommend that we did with this additional money, in addition to just keeping up with costs, both our medical costs, our cost to employ people and to be competitive in the labor marketplace, and also deal with these pension share increases. One would be, you recently approved the increase to the staffing on firefighters by 3, but with a sunset clause, because it was tied to 2 years of additional FEMA funding. I might recommend that we make that permanent, to keep those 3 additional firefighters to help us with our firefighter staffing. Also, we recently changed the income tax mix over the last couple of years to take some from the street fund and give to the rec fund, because of additional demands and costs that the citizens want. And, we've basically made the decision that we've kept our streets in pretty good shape through external funding. But, considering replacing some of that money that we took away from the street fund with some of this money that comes back in. And likewise, Athens Public Transit. Right now, Athens Public Transit, you get 1% of the mix for Athens Public Transit. That generates about $150,000 a year. They would tell you that they could use twice that to provide the level of transit. Now, there's an argument to be made about how much transit is inside the city of Athens versus how much is extending service to the wider county. But ultimately, they use that local share of that comes from the city of Athens to leverage state and federal funds to be able to provide a more robust transit system. So those are some of the uses that I would say. But I just think that the mayor asked me to come to you and make this request, provide you some of the data, and then when we look at the services that we provide the city of Athens, they're getting more expensive, and our economy in Athens is not growing as fast as we'd like it would to keep up, with those additional expenses. Hopefully that was a significant enough explanation of this document, and I'm open to your questions.
Thank you, Member Stone. Any questions before we talk as a council from the community? Okay, City Council, do you have any questions? Or yes, Member Reisner.
When was the last time we had an income tax increase?
17.
23 was the last one, but it was the safety.
Correct.
I'm thinking more like for the general fund, not a specific level.
In 2016, the voters approved one that took effect in 2017.
I see.
And that was 0.2% increase.
Member Swank?
I am much more familiar with, when it comes to levies, school levies. And one of the things, well, several things, but one of the things that the school communities often ask of their boards of education is this: if this doesn't pass, what happens? One tactic that school districts use is to very openly and honestly say X, Y, and Z. Some schools unfortunately turn it around a little bit and end up threatening the taxpayers. If you don't pass this, we're going to do this. A lot of it's tone and how you present it. So I guess my first question would be, I'll ask one now, then I'll get back in line for others. The first question would be, if this goes to the voters in May, what happens if it fails? What will the city look like?
Right. I don't know that, thank you, Member Swank, for that question. I don't know that, you would see anything immediately. I do think that over the, for several years, we would see a stagnation and possibly a reduction in specifically police and fire protection. Because the way that you provide police and fire protection is with people, and as people cost more every year, the only way that you can break even is to have less people, ultimately. But then when that becomes untenable, we have to decide what other services that we don't want. And the way that we do that is by decreasing people in the recreation world. And this community demands significant amounts of, recreation support. I mean, that's something that I've certainly experienced since I've been in this job, and seeing how seriously people take their recreation in Athens, and that's a quality of life issue. But, when you're weighing between police, fire, and recreation, you have to make hard decisions. Likewise, I would say that we would decrease funding for streets. Because that's the other location that gets a share of the income tax that goes into the street fund, and you just do less road projects. Those road projects include sidewalks and curbs and traffic signals and all of the signals and all the different the bridges and the different things that we do.
Member Carey?
Thank you. You were just talking about this, Director Stone, but in relation to the portion of this income tax that would go back into the street fund, can you give a sense of how significant that money is? Would it be enough to do additional projects, or would it be a cushion for the planned projects?
Right. So thank you for the question, Member Carey. And I don't have exact figures right now, but if you look at the income tax mix, and so that's basically the unrestricted income tax, that's the money that is not in a permanent levy. We do have a permanent levy that is in place for the operation of the community center. I think it's 0.5. It's not 0.5%. It's 0.05%, I think. And then also we've got 3 term levies. So the Public Safety Capital Fund, the Street Rehab Levy, and then the Recreation Capital Levy. If you get rid of those, you've got the unrestricted funds that go in, and that's what the mix is. Right now, I'd have to go back and look at it. I think the last time we messed with that was going into 2025. And I think the street fund right now gets 15% of that mix. And so 1% of that mix produces roughly $150,000. And so, if I were to go back and say, increasing that overall amount by 0.3%, if you were to go and put back in a couple percentage points of that mix, you could do 150,000. Going back to the original amount that we had in there a couple of years ago, I think was maybe 18%. You're looking at closer to $450,000 going back into the street fund for various projects.
Is that about enough to do a whole project?
Well,
it's small enough?
I mean, it really depends on the project, right? It doesn't go very far any longer, particularly with the construction bids that I'm seeing these days. To give you a kind of a point of reference, the Union Street project that we did recently that includes water and sewer, and some sewer, so it's beyond just street work, but it's about a $750 million, or I'm sorry, a $7 million project. To kind of give you a sense of scale. Trying to think of a couple other smaller ones that I can give you as an example. The project that we're going to do, the Simpson Avenue Bridge project next year, I think we're probably looking at around $4 million for that project, and that's to rehab that bridge. So, does $450,000, do a big project? It does about a tenth of a bridge rehab. If you're looking at a full deck replacement and that sort of thing. So it's very project specific, but, $450,000 is nothing to shake a stick at, certainly.
Thank you.
If that $450,000 were applied to street paving and repaving, about how much distance of streets could that repave?
Thank you, Member Kleinfelder. I'd say, it depends on the width of the street, certainly, but if you'd want to get very specific numbers, if you give me a couple weeks, I can look at what the 2024 street rehab or street paving, annual paving budget would have bought for $450,000, and I can give you a hard number next week or 2 weeks from now.
Thank you.
I'll just share with council that current municipal code, Title 17, determines that the funds collected shall be allocated in accordance with the following. General revenue is 1.6%, which is permanently levied. Community center operation is 0.05%, which is permanently levied. Street improvements is 0.10%, which is levied through December 31st, 2030. Arts, Parks, and Recreation is 0.10%, levied through December 31st, 2035. And public safety is 0.10%, which is levied through December 31st, 2042. Additional comments, Member Wood.
Yeah, I wonder if there's not a way to address it without taxing the residents instead, you know, for OU dropping off. I mean, as you mentioned, and Chief Reimers mentioned a couple of times, 40% of the fire runs are to Ohio University. We spent significant services towards that. I wonder if there's not another way to tackle it that would ask them to pay more their fair share rather than levy this on voters.
Look, I'm sorry, is that a question for me?
Yeah.
I'll do my best, Member Wood. It's a state institution. State institutions are governed by the state legislature. There are certain things that the city can do, tax the workers that work there, charge utility fees for the utilities that they use. But as far as just charging them for existing, I think that would be a state law question versus what we can do locally.
Yeah, Member Swank.
The current income tax in the city of Athens is an earned income tax, which basically means the only people who pay it are those who go to work, get a check every week, every 2 weeks, every 4 weeks. Those who are collecting pensions, Social Security, investments, and interest do not pay the income tax in the city of Athens. 3 of us on this side of the table, because we're all retired. You'll be there soon enough. In lieu of going the income tax route, in an effort to spread the base around, if we were to go the inside millage route, 1, is that feasible? And 2, what would that inside millage need to be to come up with the 2.587693 figure?
All right, Member Swank, I will have to get back to you on what that would be. I believe right now, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but I believe right now our inside millage in Athens is 3 mills. That's to say inside Athens Township, inside Athens City, the amount of money that goes out of property taxes to the city of Athens. I believe if you're outside the city, but you're in Athens Township, that inside millage is 10 mills. And so I think the amount that we would have without a levy, ultimately, this body can make, would be applying an additional 7 mills to properties that are inside the city limits. Understanding that all of the Ohio University property and other government property is tax exempt, we'd have to do a calculation to say what that 7 mills would gain. But we can do that, and I'll do my best to try to figure out what that would gain. Beyond that, I think it would require a property tax levy for voters inside the city. As a side note, I do occasionally make the case to property owners who are inside Athens Township but not inside Athens city limits that if they annex to the city of Athens, their property taxes will actually go down, which I don't think is common knowledge based on that differentiation between inside millage right now. So if we were to take that away, that incentive for annexation goes away. But I tend not to see too many people make an annexation decision on property taxes anyway, so that might be irrelevant. But I'll come up with, I'll do my best to come up with what the math would be.
And as a follow-up to that, I don't know if it's kind of a 2-part thing. Number 1, if it's feasible to do a combination where a certain amount of inside money and a certain amount of income tax money in a combination levy. Like most people, I don't think any of us want to pay a whole lot more taxes, but for those of us who aren't in the earned income category, all the burden is falling Wood, Gary, Clodfelder, and Thomas. Yet we still drive the streets and depend on the fire department and depend on the police department. We benefit from all that money you're paying, and we appreciate that. but I'm also for paying my fair share. Going back to the second part of this, so going back to the school thing, when schools institute these income taxes, they have a decision to make, and that's one, whether to make them perpetual or to make them for a limited period of time. Granville schools are a perfect example. They tried to pass one, very supportive of their schools, tried to pass a perpetual one, and it went down big time. They came back with a 5-year levy, and it passed with no problem. Has any consideration been given to making this, say, a 5-year levy? For the simple reason, in 2015, we could have never predicted what was going to happen in 2020 with COVID. And I don't think in 2024 we can necessarily predict what's going to happen beyond 2019 or 29. You know, Ohio University may have a big turnaround. The state may come through. I've already started conversations with our new District 95 state representative about the impact of large universities on small towns and what the state might be able to do about that. So I'm wondering if we explored the idea of a tax levy for a limited period of time. Because quite honestly, the May election is a scary election. It's an off year. It's after the Ohio University graduates. And the last time that I ran for the 4th Ward, there was a total of 1 vote from the student precincts that I represent. And I'm wondering why May over November? Because an off-year primary is the lowest turnout we ever get. So I'm just wondering if there's any rhyme or reason to that. Because if we do it in November, we can still start this starting with January 1 of 2026.
Sure, I don't have an answer to the second question, why one versus the other. Certainly I would defer to people who are more savvy with running in elections, and all of you are certainly way more savvy than I am when it comes to running in elections. With regard to a permanent versus a temporary levy, my only experience with temporary levies have to do with capital improvements levies that we tend to tie to tangible things. So the 3 that we have are the public safety capital levy, which we tied to the debt service on the fire station, and then other capital improvements for police and fire. The rec levy we tied to the debt service on the pool. And then ultimately other capital improvements to recreation. And the street rehab levy, I think the last time it passed, we tied it to I know we tied it to the Oxbow Bridge project when we did that one, and I forget what we tied it to, a specific project the last time that it passed. It might have been the Stimson Avenue Improvements Project. But the bottom line is we tend to tie those to tangible things, versus this would really be a general revenue. But I don't know, perhaps there would be more of a likelihood for it to pass if we did it from a tentative period of time or a shortened period of time.
Thank you.
Member Thomas?
I just, excuse me, when I was looking at this earlier, just as kind of a comment or point of reference, for those in the city limits on the lower end of the income scale, which a median income for Athens City is about $34,800, which may have been 22s. This would amount to $2 a week or $180 a year. Just when we're looking at costs and whatnot, on who's going to be maybe feel it differently, which isn't insubstantial, but isn't overly substantial either. And I don't know that, has income tax ever gotten lowered? It doesn't seem like a practical idea. I can't imagine.
I've never experienced people demanding less services.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that tends to be my experience since I've been here is people want more services, and so the way you pay for that is through more taxes.
Member Spianis?
I just heard today that the potential Ridges redevelopment and development project will probably be approved in December. And that's anticipated to be 700 housing units. That's a lot of income tax potential. But it also means that they'll need a lot of infrastructure to make those housing units possible. So that's a hit on us. And so I'm wondering how much that is affecting all this.
I'll do my best to speak to it based on what I know so far. My understanding is what will be approved in December, potentially approved in December, is the transfer of roughly 1/10 of the Ridges property from Ohio University to the new community authority, which is roughly 78 acres, give or take. That includes the main campus, which is a lot of the housing redevelopment there, some land along Dairy Lane, and some land on the Ridges Tier 2 property. Those 750 housing units, I believe, would be a 5 to 10 year build. If I remember correctly from speaking with, so I don't know that they would all come online at once. Insofar as what I understand the city will have to outlay from a infrastructure potential, we've kind of already done it. And you've already done it specifically by appropriating money or, taking the loan for the sewer that came through the Tier 2 property and can sewer that area, and then appropriating the water money, which wasn't a loan, it was cash, to build a 12-inch line on Dairy Lane. I don't think there's a lot of other infrastructure outlay that the city of Athens will be asked to build from the new community authority, but I haven't had that hard discussion yet, and I don't know that they've done the engineering to say, per se, what we'll have to, I'm real hesitant to go and say, it's going to be free, because nothing seems to be free. But I don't have any glaring major investment that I'm aware of right now for that particular initiative.
I want to say that my understanding, I've been pretty steeped in this as much as I could, is that we could conceivably maybe have some housing in the next couple of years rather than completed in 5 to 10 years. But I'm saying some of that housing could conceivably be done in the next year or two, assuming all goes well. So again, that would be additional income tax potential for us, I hope. I'm assuming.
Assuming they work, the people.
Assuming that it all works.
You're right.
They work in the city.
Well, the first one's supposed to be designated to senior housing, so maybe not.
Maybe not.
Right, that was my point, is that we do know that there are well over 100
this side of the table.
senior citizen
Yeah,
units as part of that, so that brings that 700 down of income taxpayers.
yeah.
But I appreciate it.
You're
A lot
welcome.
of people will.
Additional comments from council?
Just a question.
Sure, Member Swank.
So ideally, as far as council action, we have 3 regularly scheduled meetings left between now and the end of the year to get on the ballot. I believe it's not. I know it's 90 days before the May whatever, so it's roughly the first Monday or Tuesday of February. In your mind, does it matter one way or the other when we do this?
As long as if you want it on the May ballot, it probably needs to pass before the end of January.
Okay. Thanks.
Appreciate the presentation, Service Safety Director Stone. Member Bodfelder?
I think that you make a really good point about how the city of Athens needs more revenue. I guess I would just like to request that creative alternatives might be considered to doing it all through a perpetual increase in income tax, because Member Thomas raised the issue of what it would mean to someone making I think you said $32,000 of $102 a year. That actually might matter, right? And the millage, if we went the millage route, that might matter to seniors on fixed incomes. And I'm not sure there's a perfect solution, and I'm not advocating for a particular approach. But I guess I would request that we consider this really thoughtfully, and we try to minimize the amount of increase needed from perpetual income tax increases.
Thank you, Member Cloudfelder. Good point. Any additional comments? Okay, we will be revisiting this issue, and we appreciate any additional information you can provide on Mr. Swank's and others' questions. Okay, moving on to the second item on the Committee of the Whole, City Council rules, amendments to those rules, and this is being presented by Councilmember Swank.
Director Stone, you're off the hook for a few minutes here. Because this is the rules of council and how we operate and do business. Hopefully everyone has had an opportunity to look over these. Clerk Walker sent these out in advance. Really, there are only 3 areas of some possible changes. Again, these are possible changes. Certainly open for discussion and so on and so forth. Mr. President, is this something that we need to go through the normal procedure in the committee, administration, the community before because these are rules of council as opposed to ordinances and how the city is run?
I believe we'll follow our standard procedure or new standard procedure. I don't anticipate a lot of.
Okay.
So we can just,
Just wanted to check.
city administration probably has nothing to put in here. And I'll let you handle this.
Yeah, that's fine. Would you prefer that we do, since there are only 3 areas, do we do them all at the same time or one at a time?
In my review, I think you could go through all 3 of them
Okay.
together.
First one deals with Rule 1, and basically it kind of standardizes our meetings. I'll just read from the middle part here. And council is called to order and proceeds to business. Should the regular session of council occur upon a federal holiday, such as we had yesterday, then council shall meet in regular session on the following day. As it is now, on some federal holidays we meet, some we don't meet. The ones that we don't meet on are New Year's Day, if it happens to fall on a Monday, Martin Luther King Day, Memorial Day, Juneteenth, if it happens to fall on a Monday, Labor Day, and I think that's it. This would simply add President's Day and Indigenous Peoples' Day, which are recognized federal holidays where you don't get mail, the bank's not open, so on and so forth. So we just make them all federal holidays, fall on a Monday, across the board. You wouldn't have to remember, is this one we do, is this one we don't do? We would meet on that Tuesday, the day following, just to standardize things. The other thing is, in terms of standardizing too, I think it also puts all of these holidays on equal footing. They're all special. We're recognizing something, whether it be people who gave their lives, Memorial Day, people who served, Veterans Day, the end of slavery in the state of Texas, Juneteenth, the 46 people we've had as presidents, puts them all on the same level. And I think that's important when we talk about equity and across the board. So that's that's the reasoning behind this. Member Clodfelder.
It sounds like, since we already move our meetings, if those particular important holidays that you just mentioned fall on a Monday, it sounds like the main change would be for President's Day, because Indigenous Peoples' Day is always on a Thursday.
Well, when I say indigenous people, what has commonly been called Columbus Day.
Oh, all right, it was
Yeah.
Thanksgiving.
Native American Day is that Friday after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah, and I think we're all eating turkey that day.
right.
But yeah, those would be the two. It'd be President's Day, recognizing the 46 individuals who served as President of the United States, and the other one would be Indigenous Peoples' Day, the second Monday in October. And considering the fact that before every business meeting we read a land statement, this is further equal treatment and recognition of that day.
That makes sense.
That's all I get. President Grau.
I appreciate your bringing this up for discussion. As I understand, the major issues here are that some of these holidays are considered floating holidays, right? And so some of the holidays you mentioned, the city is in fact open.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reason why we have proceeded as we have is not based on whether the mail's coming or it is that the city is open.
Right.
So we would be changing perhaps contracts with city employees in terms of the days that they have off. Is that correct?
No, it wouldn't change anything because we'd be meeting on Tuesdays, and to the best of my knowledge, the city operates every Tuesday.
Okay, that was the only,
Yeah.
Do they operate the same hours though, working into the evening like they do now? Or is that
We can adjust.
taken?
We have to. I mean, if you want to meet on a day that the city's closed, there's other years that, Veterans Day is on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Thursday, and it's almost November 11th because of the 11th hour and the 11th day of the 11th month. So, that's the city holiday. If it happens to be on the day that you're meeting, we'll bring someone in overtime and we'll open things.
I was thinking more like, because they're here tonight versus, but they would normally be here for BCA.
Right.
But, yeah.
But, I mean, like, if this were a city holiday today, but for whatever reason, you know, because the mayor ordained it, but the council wanted to meet, you know, we would just have people working on, we have people working holidays. We have police and firefighters and wastewater plant operators and water plant operators operate on holidays, all the time. And if we needed to allow you to meet, we can do that.
Yeah, we wouldn't be meeting on, yeah, okay. Okay. Other members of council? Members of the public? Elected officials? All right, good deal. We jump now all the way down to number 14, and that is the public speaks. What this suggestion or proposal does is clean it up a little bit and define it. Right now it reads, each speaker will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes with a limitation of 15 minutes imposed on the total amount of time allowed on the topic, which shall include all of the participation by council members, elected officials, and administrative representatives. What this does is drop part of that and add something in terms of when the public can speak. So it would just simply read, each speaker will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes, which we currently do, with a minimum of 15 minutes, with a limitation of 15 minutes for public participation per topic. Unless, and here's the key part, the president of council would continue to hold the power that they currently have to extend the time. So all this does is simply says that 15 minutes for public participation with the caveat, if the president deems it appropriate, which he has done in the past, and Chris Nisley before him, and so on and so forth, to extend conversation when we have huge audiences that want to speak a lot and have a lot of points. What it does is allows conversation to last more than 15 minutes, though, because the way it was, that 15 minutes included all of our discussions, the administration, time to get all that. There might not be time for them, which I think is important that we define that. So that's the suggestion for this change. Members of council? Elected official? You're by yourself tonight. Okay, and the last one is all the way down to Rule 29, I believe. Okay, all this does is make rule committee meetings consistent with regular meetings in terms of getting information to council members. And under A, it simply says, any subject matter brought before city council shall first be referred to the proper committee chair or official, and that committee chair or official shall forward copies of all materials to be considered at the next committee meeting to each member of the committee by noon on Friday before the committee meeting. Give an example of that. The two things before the Planning and Development Committee today are going to be a Title 39 sign regulation discussion and a Sunday Creek Horizons contract situation. I did not meet the 12 o'clock deadline on Friday, but Friday afternoon, members of the Planning and Development Committee got this material, which gave them an opportunity over the weekend to look at it, to digest it. Some things are rather routine, such as the sign regulations, but some things are rather complex and have lots of numbers and facts and figures. And this gives people time to prepare for it so that when we get here, we can have a discussion, a meaningful discussion, and not have to rely so much on, the administration. They do a great job of getting us material. It becomes incumbent upon the committee chair then to get it to his or her respective committee members in plenty of time. The only question was, what happens if you miss the noon deadline? Because as our clerk well knows, at the last minute, things do come up. Do we need to leave noon in there, or do we simply say a member of the committee by Friday before the committee meeting? Thoughts? Particularly committee chair, Member Thomas.
Noon. I would remove noon
Okay.
for leeway purposes at the bare minimum.
Defer to some of the committee chairs. Yes, Member McCary.
Thank you. I could see the framing it as by Friday, causing some confusion, as in needs to happen before 12:01 a.m. on Friday? Or is it, I would assume kind of end of business Friday is kind of what I would naturally think of.
I guess my thought is we get it to people Friday, and I would agree, Member Thomas, I think taking noon out is a good idea. If you get it Friday, that gives you all day Saturday, all day Sunday, and some time on Monday. But if you want to do the, by close of business on Friday,
Or no later than Friday, I think would be fine.
Friday at 5 instead of Friday at noon.
City closes at
I don't care.
How about 7:30?
Flip a coin.
thoughts, because we will bring this before council. Oh, no, we're gonna, when do we vote on this?
Yeah.
Yeah, at the next regular meeting, okay, yeah. So we don't have to amend it when we vote next week. What's
Yeah,
the
that's fine.
consensus here?
I think by the end of the business day.
End of the business day on Friday,
Which for the city is 4.
4 o'clock, yeah.
That's right. Which I think is fine.
A question that I believe this might leave is if those materials are not shared on Friday or by the end of the day Friday, maybe they're shared on Saturday or Sunday or even Monday before council meeting, what would we do in response to a committee member's request that we perhaps table the item?
Yes.
Are you thinking of a response to that?
I'm just kind of looking at President Crowell. Thoughts on that?
Well, I am thinking of a recent agenda change where a citizen came to council expecting an item because they saw the released agenda on Thursday, and then they wouldn't necessarily know that the information had not, that additional information had come in. I'm just wondering how, if there is something in place where, you know, the committee chair, if they are, I don't know, I have to think through this, but if you don't have the materials by close of business on Friday, although the agenda has gone out and the item appears on the agenda, are you not announcing the removal of that agenda item until the committee meeting, and then how does the citizenry know?
Clerk Walker, we have deleted agenda items in the past at the meeting, have we not?
I don't like that.
It has happened,
People
but
come for a meeting and they
right.
plan to come. I don't want to have people showing up and then changing the agenda last minute or deleting it over a timing issue.
No, I would agree. I think it's a courtesy. That agenda that was released though was a draft agenda. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I guess my concern is that it's really awkward for us to get things on Monday that we're not prepared to talk about. I really think that's embarrassing. And, you know, like, I had a meeting, I didn't check my email, so we got this wonderful spreadsheet, but it would have been nice for the public to be able to see that. Even to have it maybe on the screen if we couldn't do that. I really appreciate that. I think it's really good. But I would like to have the public be able to see it and some advance notice whenever possible, unless it's an emergency.
And, you know, emergencies do come up, and Robert's Rules of Order, one of the things that a person can do at the beginning of a meeting is move to amend the agenda to add an item. So things do come up in emergency, but they're fairly rare. So would be okay with the close of business on Friday at this part of it? Okay. Yes, sir.
I'm only gonna say this out of respect to Clerk Walker. If there's information that needs to be conveyed to everybody, and it came to Clerk Walker at 3:59, does Clerk Walker have to work late to get that to everybody else? I mean, I guess if I'm in her shoes, I'm a little like I would rather have the information at a decent time of day, so that if I need to prepare something that needs to be dispersed to everybody, I have the time to do it before I can go home on Friday and not have to worry about that. I understand everybody's thought process, but
Yeah.
you know, at Brennan's we require 48-hour, you know, for certain things we want to do. I'm just thinking for her time, or the clerk's time, whoever it might be at some point.
Well, I
That's
thought,
my only suggestion.
well, I thought we were talking about, we would get, the committee chairs would get it earlier, and we would have to make sure that they get it out. So she would have to get it well in advance
Okay.
in order to get to the.
Okay, if I've got that process.
Yeah, because the
Okay.
stuff that she gets is due by close of business Wednesday, correct? Yeah, which
Right.
gives her all day Thursday and Friday to get it to the committee chair to get to the respective
Okay,
committees.
scratch it.
Right.
Then I was a little misunderstood on
Okay.
on how you're doing that. Sorry.
But it was a nice inclination.
I just,
I like
yeah.
that 48-hour rule though.
Yeah.
Member Wood.
Yeah, I would even go further than Sullivan and say that I like having everything in the civic clerk thing in the format there. I embarrassingly said I didn't have something last week that Debbie had sent because I didn't know where it was in the emails and I missed it. And we have to like fish through our emails to find the thing for the topic. I'm toggling between as we talk. I much prefer to have things in the civic clerk where we can find them as opposed to jumping through Microsoft. That's the topic, I guess, but I just think we have this, we pay a lot of money for it. And, yeah, I like I said, I apologize to the clerk too, because I said I didn't have something and it was in the email, but I didn't find it. So if there's some other way to circulate things or have them available,
I am absolutely on board with that. And I like to go to Civic Clerk and look stuff up and know that the documents are there. And if we do that, then we don't really have to send it out. Right?
When does it get
Debbie?
loaded in the civic clerk?
It doesn't now that it just goes to the
Committee,
committees.
yeah.
Yep.
It doesn't go to the full council, and there isn't any way in civic clerk to just put it into a committee.
Well, what's terrible about having the whole, everybody be able to see it? They wouldn't have to look at it. They'd
Yeah.
just be there.
yeah.
I think it might be a lot more work for the clerk. Reading things right.
No,
No?
that's right.
Oh, okay. Well, then I would find that helpful too. Just to, yeah.
It kind of
everything's-
negates the point of a committee, though.
Why?
Not
If
really,
we
you
have
just
7
don't,
people on every single committee, then we don't have committees, we just have constant council.
no, you just don't have to look at the other people's stuff, you look at your own.
Yeah. I guess I always, I'm a pre-prepper, I like to be prepared, but also there's just a lot of things that can change and pop up, and getting things sent out early is great, but I don't want to see punishment or, I don't know, things, yeah. Yeah, no floggings. Yeah,
The purpose with all this was twofold. One, to make it consistent with what we do with the general sessions. But secondly, to avoid, and I'm gonna be very candid, to avoid what we had one committee ago, where we had multiple items and nobody had seen anything.
Yeah.
Sadly, that was the third meeting in 3 years I missed, so I had to watch it on TV. But I'm gonna tell you what, I'm glad I wasn't on screen that day, because we didn't look very organized. That's not a criticism, that's just an observation. And I think we owe it to the public to present as professional an organization as demeanor as possible. And by and large, we do that. But when we don't have the information, I've had people text me in the middle of a meeting, is that the first time you saw that?
Oh, wow.
And that's not a good, that's from former elected officials, and that's not a good text to get. So for right now, let's leave it at, I would suggest we leave it at the close of business on Friday, knowing full well there are exceptions, there are changes. No one's gonna get flogged or putting stocks out in the public square. And we may investigate going forward if folks back there and Clerk Walker can put it in civic plus, that'd be great. But for now, we'll get the information in people's hands so they are prepared. As Member Thomas said, be organized when we get up here. All right, the second part of this is very simple. B, when any person is about to address a committee, they shall request permission from the committee chair. Just like we do in a regular meeting, they ask permission from the President of Council. No debate, disrespect, or obscenity shall be tolerated. The committee chair shall rule any such individual out of order. Individual members of the public shall be permitted to speak. And here's the key, only one time per committee topic. Each speaker will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes with a limitation of 15 minutes for public participation per topic, unless permission to extend the time has been granted by the committee chair. Most of that language is just very consistent with a general meeting. And then finally, we just have to put a C in front of that last one. But what it does, two things. It cleans that language up and makes it a committee meeting and public participation consistent with a general meeting and public participation. Questions, comments? Yes, sir.
I would just say that if the intention of setting the Friday deadline is to be very explicit about when this information can be used for the following committee meeting, that you put a time, close of business doesn't sound explicit to me. Close of business might be one thing to somebody and something different to somebody else. So if you have a time, if it's 4 p.m., if that's what you're talking about, I would use 4 p.m.
Okay,
Just whatever language you want to use in this.
Council?
okay.
Okay, 4 p.m. Don't want to pay any overtime. That takes care of city council rules. So I guess the procedure now is at the next meeting, that would be down there at the bottom is just to make a motion, vote. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Swank. We now are moving on to the Planning and Development Committee, chaired by Member Swank and joined by Members Thomas, Spielness, and Wood.
Okay, these two should be fairly short. How number, the first bullet point came up, is that I know several members of council, maybe the city administration, I'm not sure, received concerns or complaints leading up to this most recent election based on the size of some signs that were displayed within the city, political signs for particular candidates. I talked with the law director, and I've known about this for about 6 or 8 years, happened to stumble on it. Nothing could be done about that because those large signs were out of compliance with code. But the problem is, if we took those large signs down, we would also have to take down every small yard sign in the city, political yard sign, because all of those are out of compliance too. Our code currently states that a political sign in a yard can be 350 square inches. The standard sign that many of us have used in our campaigns happens to be 432 square inches. I checked with Performance Lettering and Signs, and if you order a sign today, the standard sign is 24 inches by 18 inches, which happens to be 432 inches. The proposal is to change this section of Title 23 from 350 square inches to 432 square inches so that all of the signs will be in compliance. I've met with the law director. You cannot regulate speech on a sign, but the courts have ruled you can regulate signs for aesthetics and safety. The one big sign on East State Street was actually blocking people's views of traffic coming up East State Street. So that's the only change. Members of the administration, elected official, members of council in the audience. Now we're back to us.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if we could also add either, I understand the law director feels we can't add things about speech, but we have in our neighborhood some people that displaying political items with obscenity on them. I wonder if we can regulate that at all. Normally, I'm a firm ACLU believer, but it was embarrassing to have this type of obscenity up in somebody's front yard for the last couple of months.
I won't speak for the law director, but on my meeting with her 6 months ago, I quoted a sign that began with the letter F.
Yeah.
And she said, couldn't do a thing about it. However, save that comment when it comes up for first reading on Monday. Let's ask that question. She'll be in attendance. And if she feels we can amend it, we could do it at that time. If not, I'm afraid we're gonna have to leave those up.
I imagine we're talking about the same sign.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think it's just, I disagree. I think we've, the Supreme Court said we can legislate obscenity. And I think that we should do so, but.
Could not agree more. Other members? Okay, second item. It's time to consider renewing the Sunday Creek Horizons contract. I had a nice meeting with Director Stone last week to talk about this. Members of the committee, you've received the documents. The overview, basically, Sunday Creek Horizons, with some of the reorganization in the administration, particularly with member retiring and the institutional knowledge that we'll leave with her, has agreed to take over project management and administration of the city grant-funded projects, planning and project funding division. They also will take on the transition plan completion of the American with Disabilities Act, the ADA Act, which we've had lots of conversation about. They also have agreed to take on community and economic development activities, community partnerships division and private partnerships division in conjunction with Molly Fitzgerald's organization that we heard from today. Some projects that they're looking at are the redevelopment of the Columbus Road Fire Station, utilization of the city's fiber assets, construction of the Alco boat ramp. Alco is what used to be called the Habitat House out on Union Street. And before that, supposedly the Little Red Schoolhouse, which we're not sure about. Alco stands for Athens Lumber Company. Establishment, this is what I'm really excited about, establishment of a possible physical hub for the farmers market. And others are identified, and then of course, they will advocate for us at the legislative level in Columbus, and they will take over some communication responsibilities. The neat part about this is, in my opinion, is they have expanded their scope of activities, and Director Stone was able to negotiate that at the same price that we have paid in the past. So that's what the overview of Sunday Creek is all about. And as you saw in the other document, they have been successful in securing millions of dollars of grant funding for us here in the city of Athens. Director Stone, would you like to add anything to that, sir?
Thank you, Member Swank. I mean, very briefly, you pretty much covered it, but, you know, in the first year that we employed Sunday Creek Horizons as an advocate for us, you know, they were well worth all of their costs that we paid. And they pulled in millions more than we expended in costs. Last year, I believe that and I'll take personal blame for this, underutilized their services because, you know, we have a fixed amount that we pay them, and basically I can call them as many times as I want to do things, and functionally I probably didn't call them as many times as I should have last year. Going into 2025, with the retirement and non-replacement of our grants administrator, there are certain grants that have a lot of administrative oversight and work that goes into them, and ultimately, rather than replace that person in-house, I'd like Sunday Creek to do it. Additionally, we've kind of focused them on several different things that we need to have done. You know, it's just an expansion of the city staff, and functionally, it's a pretty cheap expansion of the city staff. You're not paying healthcare and all those additional costs associated with extra staff members to have this capacity. And you know, I think they've been a good asset to the city. And we've already put the money in the budget to pay for this, but because it's greater than $75,000, we need your individual authorization.
And the good part is it's a one-year contract, and next year at this time, I would assume we would review it again and hopefully get as positive a report to move ahead for 2026. Members, elected official, members of council in the audience, members of the committee. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I must say that I'm impressed with all the things that they've done, and we're looking, I hope that we can have them do even more for us this year, so I'm in favor. Thank you.
Both of those items will be up for first reading at the next meeting, and that concludes the Planning and
Hey, may I
Development Committee.
comment real quick?
Sir, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Quite all right. I just wanted to comment that I really appreciate politically where Sunday Creek Horizons has put themselves in the state of Ohio, and they can be very advantageous, I think, with our current climate to get some of these grants and to work with, both parties to help move Athens forward. And I know you listed a number of projects. I'm not sure you listed some of like the ADA transition plan.
Yeah.
Which I was really excited,
Right.
and maybe you didn't mention that. There's lots of good things that I think they can work on here. That's all. Thank you.
That concludes Planning and Development.
Thank you, Member Swank. We will now move on to the Transportation Committee, chaired by Member Spelness and joined by Members Clodfelter, McCary, and Reisner.
Sitting here, Jan.
Correct. Good night, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
Floor is yours,
Wanna make
Chair
sure I get the
Spelness.
signal to start.
You're good.
Okay, we have one small item. Not surprisingly, we have something having to do with our vehicles. So this one is the disposal of 2 transit buses. And I didn't get a lot of information about this, but we have one, and it says the total cost is $32,453, and the other one is $48,228. I don't know what we have in the way of replacing them, and perhaps the administration can clarify that. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Member Spelness. I have no idea about this particular topic. It did not come through my office to make it onto the agenda, so I don't know what it is. My guess is this is a request from HABCAP to dispose of a couple more
Yeah.
buses that were old ones, but they didn't talk to me about it.
Yes. Okay, on that exciting note, anybody have any comments out? Any other elected officials or anybody out in the audience? Since we just explained that we know very little about this, except that we need to get rid of them. I would be happy to find out more by next week.
A little bit more than that.
Okay.
The years of the buses and the mileage.
Oh, well, I do have that
Okay.
on here. No, I don't.
Yeah, it's-
Okay, yes, thank you. So the mileage is 313,491 miles on one of them and 218,326 on the other. Yeah, and this is, this is from Rudy Butner from the Transportation Coordinator. And I appreciate that, so. That's all we have right now. We'll find out more next week.
Okay, if there are no other comments from council members, then we'll move on to City and Safety Services Committee, chaired by Member McCary and joined by Members Reisner, Swank, and Thomas.
10,000 steps and back and forth.
Thank you, President Crowell. We have one item on our City Safety Services Committee agenda for the evening, and that's Residential Water Loss Protection Program. Have you ever had a leaky faucet? Have you ever had a pipe burst because it's cold outside and wondered how or if you're going to be held responsible for all the water loss and that expense? did you know that for just $36 you could get insurance? And I'm gonna ask our City Safety Services Director to tell us more about this exciting program.
Sure, thank you, Member Carey. This is a request that we're making to run a program similar to other water providers in the areas. Most notably, LEAX has a program they've run for several years where they basically charge an opt-in fee that customers can pay, that if they have a leak during the year that causes a significant loss of water, that they get a credit associated with that leak. So it's basically insurance for a situation if you want to, carry it in case you have a leak. Right now, the code only allows us to issue relief for a water break at somebody's house. A line breaks into their sink, or they leave their outside hose running accidentally, or it freezes and breaks. If they can demonstrate to us that it didn't go down the sewer, and so therefore we can waive the sewer portion of that fee. But otherwise, we have to charge them for the water that they use by law. And so this is a mechanism that folks could pay to opt into, and then we could issue a one-time credit for the loss. So this is separate and distinct from like service line insurance that individual insurance providers sell to people's houses. Likewise, we've historically partnered with National League of Cities to introduce people to a program where they can buy service line insurance that helps cover the cost if they have to have repairs to their service line. What I'm talking about here is specifically a credit for the actual water usage. We'd like to do $36 a year. My guess is by the time this passes, we'll not have enough time to roll it out to pay for a full year. So what we would do when we do roll it out is prorate it for 2025 for whatever the amount of time that would be available. And then, going forward, it would automatically renew if people wanted to. And then, we get mailings out a little closer to probably October for 2026.
Thank you. If I understand our new procedure correctly, we will check in with the audience before inviting comments from council members. So do we have anyone in the audience who'd like to ask a question or share a comment about this residential water loss protection program? Yes.
Beth Clodfelter, 35 South Shannon Avenue. I'm curious, all the $36 premiums,
Would the city be benefiting in any way from the payment of those premiums?
The money just would go into the water fund. And it would go into the water fund. So it would be a revenue stream that would be.
That would stay within the city budget?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
it would go into the unappropriated balance of the water fund.
Well, that makes more sense to me than it going to some insurance company.
Correct. There's no third party involved here. This is specifically a city program to create a mechanism to extend a credit, basically cover the cost of it. You have a break in your house and you use thousands of gallons of water, and instead of paying for those thousands of gallons of water, once you get one time where that would be it's kind of like AAA, you get a tow 100 miles. If you need a tow.
How about any other good questions or comments from the audience? Let's bring it back to committee members. Member Spink.
Two real quick ones. Would this also apply to rental properties?
It would.
And secondly, just guessing, do most of the properties, like my house, do I have a 5/8 or a 1 inch? Most of the properties have that?
Correct.
Okay.
This is primarily a residential
Yeah.
thing. This program is not designed to, provide a mechanism for the plains that we currently have an 8-inch line that goes to with an 8-inch meter to sell water to the Athens County Water and Sewer District. It would not apply to that. This is specifically for residential customers.
Okay, thanks.
Member Spielness.
Just a quick comment. I remember when I was at OU, there was someone I encountered who unfortunately went to jail for about 6 months, and a water line broke, and she came out with like $24,000 in water bill. Now, it adds up really, really fast. It's amazing. I mean, even when I've had a runny toilet and didn't deal with it quickly enough, it's unbelievably expensive.
Yeah, credit for time served.
Right.
To the point, if you, had some sort of device that was not wired correctly in your house and it consumed more electricity than it otherwise should, AEP would not give you a pass. If you burn more gas, you leave your windows open and run your furnace, Columbia Gas will not give you more benefit than you should. The city of Athens currently can't and doesn't, by law, give a pass to people because they had a misfortune of having a break happen, because there's a cost associated with producing that water. But this would be a mechanism that they could get a pass, should they opt in.
Member Reisner.
Is there anything significant about the amount, $36?
It's $3 a month. LEAX is $30. In most cases we're cheaper than LEAX, but we thought $6 more than LEAX would be appropriate given the amount of credit that we would issue.
Thank you.
Any other questions from committee members? All right, then would we expect to see an ordinance at our next meeting then? Excellent. That concludes our City and Safety Services Committee meeting.
Thank you very much, and we are adjourned at 9:40 p.m. Thank you.